You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 28th of October 2013. 8 years for impotent, it's my first time I'm sorry, Sudanese rapist. 7 years for illegal immigrant rapist who wasn't deported 7 years ago. Father started killer blaze after daughter planned to wed lover he didn't approve of. Bulgaria building a wall and turning mosques into bars. Refugees at Poland's gates. Dutch scientists are seeking to create mutant flu viruses. High prelates trade luxury cars for economy vehicles. Syria, Islamic jihadists burn Bibles and Christian books outside Christian churches. In China, cockroaches are now being farmed, powdered and sold to pharmaceutical companies as medicine. Thought for the day, straight from the horse's mouth. And finally, another horse's mouth. Now I do have a response to the comments on the Gurkha Thought for the Day on Friday. Firstly, thank you to Pete Malloy for his comments, and I would highlight the fact that World at 8 is a Radio Britain podcast. It goes out on YouTube as well as through the BNP site. It is not a British National Party podcast, although it features some BNP members, of whom I am one. Thought for the Day is my personal view, and I've always taken full responsibility for it, as it can often not follow the party line. Thank you also for the majority of very well thought out comments on the Pete's and World at 8 site. I also thank Hate Not Hope for actually listening to my thought all the way through and spreading the word. I couldn't have done better myself. The point missed was the fact that we should think more of our own serving soldiers and ex-soldiers than a vast array of so-called relatives of a few thousand mercenaries who already live thousands of miles away in their own country. However, I would like to say to a Mr. or Ms. Agazeo who commented on Pete's article that obviously he or she stands just about as much of a chance of producing a well-informed and succinct comment as I do in obtaining a very lucrative position on the Guardian newspaper, although I feel I do deserve one. UK News. 8 years for impotent, it's my first time I'm sorry rapist. A man who failed in his attempt to rape a woman in a Peterborough street told her, "It's my first time, I'm sorry," a court heard as he was jailed for 8 years. Khalid Abdullah, 35, tried to sexually attack the woman on April the 13th at 5:20 a.m, dragging her into an alleyway and pushing her up against a wall on Star Road. Abdullah also threatened the woman with a knife, but due to his impotence he was unable to carry out the rape. He then told the woman to call the police herself before she managed to escape from his grip and get away. Rape Crisis, a confidential counselling service, supported the woman in coming forward to the police. CCTV footage was combed through and a Sudan-born Abdullah was identified and arrested the following day. Abdullah denied the charge, but a week-long trial at Peterborough Crown Court led to him being sentenced for 8 years for attempted rape. He has begun his custodial sentence. 7 years for illegal immigrant rapist who wasn't deported 7 years ago. An illegal immigrant who should have been deported in 2006 but was temporarily allowed to stay in the UK because he had a wife and children went on to rape a woman in Northampton, a court has heard. Idreez Popoola, aged 34, has been sentenced to 7 years in prison after he attacked a woman in her home in Northampton on December 29th last year, after meeting her while working as an agency-employed bouncer outside Barstow in the town centre. Northampton Crown Court heard Popoola should have been deported in 2006 after his temporary UK visa expired, but he was granted temporary leave to stay in this country after being arrested in 2011 because he had a wife and children in the country. World at 8. Of course he did, Malcolm. Father started killer blaze after daughter planned to wed lover he didn't approve. A father tried to wipe out his family and killed his wife after their daughter said she wanted to marry for love, a court heard. Mohammed Inayet flew into a rage when his daughter Kalsoom Bibi told him she planned to move to Dubai to marry a policeman. He said she had brought dishonour on the family and allegedly threatened to kill her before pouring gallons of petrol over his family home and setting it alight. On the night of April 17th, Inayat killed his wife Naika and injured his 3 daughters in a blaze that took seconds to engulf the house, Birmingham Crown Court heard. World at 8. Lunatics allowed to run riot. His sentencing should be interesting. and the insurance payout on his house. European news. Bulgaria building a wall and turning mosques into bars. Bulgaria will build a 30-mile long wall along the border with Turkey to prevent refugees to illegally enter the country, said the country's defence ministry. According to authorities, the purpose of the wall to stop the flow of refugees from civil war in Syria that takes into Bulgaria illegally along the 30-mile long border, but forces them to come into the country at the official border crossings and thus the EU. At the same time, unable to provide enough money to gain back their worship place, the Muslim community in Bulgaria's second largest city of Plovdiv is outraged by the turning of a historic mosque into a bar. The task-approved Stonebridge Mosque, a 16th century worship place in Plovdiv, was turned into a bar and a restaurant. The communist regime in 1944 confiscated the mosque, keeping it closed for decades until it was given to two Bulgarians in the 1990s. Angered by the presence of a restaurant serving alcohol at the site of the mosque, Muslims have been trying ever since to recover the mosque. However, the owners of the mosque are demanding €600,000 from the regional Grand Mufti. World at 8, don't ya love it? Refugees at Poland's gates. A record number of immigrants without visas, documents and money are storming Poland's borders, warns Rzeczpospolita. In the first half of this year alone, Poland turned away 52,000 people from the east, mostly Russians of Chechen origin, Ukrainians, Bulgarians and Georgians, according to data from the Border Guard, the nation's border security agency. Meanwhile, the Office for Foreigners has received a flood of asylum applications, with more than 14,000 filed by mid-October. This is twice as many as the previous year, a historic record, said Rafa Rogala, head of the office, pointing to economic factors, i.e. poverty, as the primary factor behind this influx. According to the Daily, Poland is just a transit country for the majority of immigrants who are heading for Germany. World at 8. Oh, an invasion in the reverse then. Dutch scientists are seeking to create mutant flu viruses. Ron Fouchier and Ab Oosterhuis say the benefits of this gene mutation research far outweigh the risks. The experiments, designed to explore H7N9's potential to develop drug resistance and find which genetic modifications might enhance its ability to spread, could offer the know-how to halt a lethal flu pandemic, they say. Stephen Salzberg, a professor of medicine and biostatistics from Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, accused them of an outrageous display of chutzpah, and says Fouchier is deeply confused about the possible benefits of this work, which Salzberg argues are marginal at best. The notion of a gain-of-function research on pathogens is very, very dangerous, he told Reuters. World news. High prelates trade luxury cars for economy vehicles. Pope Francis' call for the church to be poor and for the poor is producing the first effects at the Vatican. After a number of bishops and high prelates replaced their golden crosses with more sober silver or metal ones, the pontiff himself wears a cross made of iron. The attention has turned to cars. Some 20 prelates and monsignors have traded the luxury cars so far used to get around for the more modest utility cars. The Pope declared war on luxury cars in July when he said that it bothers me when I see a priest or sister with a brand new car. The pontiff was the first to set the example, refusing the Mercedes used by his predecessor Benedict XVI and opting instead for a Volkswagen Phaeton and more recently for an old Ford Focus. He's also used a variety of economy cars during his travels, including a Fiat Panda and an old Fiat Campagnola. Syria, Islamist jihadists burn Bibles and Christian books outside Christian church. The militia of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, the faction that in several regions of Syria monopolised the armed insurrection against the regime in Damascus in recent days, have organised a book burning of Bibles and Christian books in front of the Greek Catholic Church of Our Lady of the Annunciation in Raqqa, the Syrian city which has been for months under the control of anti-Assad militias. World at 8. And who will form a Christian jihad movement for this? When the US pastor threatened to burn the Quran, the entire Muslim world went up in a jihadi mode. Demos everywhere. Who will fly the Christian flag in face of this yet another disgusting and vile act? Not the C of E, I fear. In China, cockroaches are now being farmed, powdered and sold to pharmaceutical companies as medicine. The mere thought of unexpectedly encountering one in a dark hallway or bedroom is probably enough to send shivers up your spine, seeing as how there are likely many more of the nasty critters where that one came from. But in China, cockroaches have become big business. with prodigious entrepreneurs now intentionally raising them by the millions for the purpose of selling them to pharmaceutical companies as a form of medicine. The UK's Telegraph reports that the cockroach industry is simply booming in many parts of China as news about the alleged health benefits associated with their consumption spreads like wildfire. Everything from blood clots to gastroenteritis to tuberculosis and heart disease are now considered eligible conditions for treatment with cockroaches, which is why so many people want to get their hands on them these days. World at 8. It is sick and typical of the Chinese mindset, sheer hysteria on health matters. It's the Chinese who believe in the horn of a buffalo, the bile of a still living bear, and some parts of tigers are beneficial. Well, they aren't. If you have a small todger, you have a small todger. If you're dying, then you're dying, and no part of endangered species or bugs are going to help you. I happen to like cockroaches, they are survivors. Well, of course, until the Chinese have had their say. Now they will probably become an endangered species. We're talking about the same people who gave us bird flu and are still sending man-made chemical highs to the West. Those people. Thought for the day. Straight from the horse's mouth. Now, one of the first rules about any war is never underestimate your enemy ever. And we in this country are doing just that. It doesn't matter if the US or Europe do the same thing, as they have standing armies more powerful than ours, and many have the right to self-arm and defend themselves in cases of civil strife that we in this country do not. Thus we cannot afford to be either ignorant or dismissive of not only who is our enemy, but why they are enemies. This is an article released on Sharia Unveiled and reported through our man in the ministry. It is a real doozy and hits the target of the soft West on the button. Excuse the pun. It is written ostensibly by an ex-Muslim to the West, or rather to the infidel world. It is an eye-opener for all the stupid and plain ignorant of our culture who truly believe that the followers of Islam mean us non-believers no harm. Following are the Islamic messages to the West and seem to be directed at the US in particular, but apply everywhere there is an Islamic population. And I quote, "I was born and raised a Muslim. My whole family is still Muslim. I know every genetic code of Muslim. I know the Islamic brain. I live and breathe with them. I am an insider. I left Islam when I understood that Islam is a sick and evil religion. To the infidels of the West, Constitution for the new Islamic Republic of EU and USA is under construction. We will fight the infidel to death. Meanwhile, American laws will protect us. Democrats and leftists will support us. UNO will legitimise us. CAIR will incubate us. ACLU will empower us. Western universities will educate us. Mosques will shelter us. OPEC will finance us. Hollywood will love us. Kofi Annan will pass politically correct sympathetic statements for jihadists. Our children will immigrate from Pakistan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran and Indonesia, and even from India to the US and to other Western countries. They will go to the West for education in full scholarship. America is paying and will continue to pay for our children's educations and their upbringing in state-funded Islamic schools. We will use your welfare system. Our children will also send money home while they're preparing for jihad. We will take the advantage of American kindness, gullibility and compassion. When time comes, we will stab them in the back. We will say one thing on the camera and teach another thing to our children at home. We will give subliminal messages to our children to uphold Islam at any cost. Our children in America will always care more about Islamic countries' interests than US interests. We will teach our children Islamic supremacy from the very childhood. We will teach them not to compromise with infidel. Once we do that from the early age, our children won't hesitate to be martyrs. We will take over the Europe first and then US will be next. We already have a solid ground in the UK, Holland, Sweden, Spain, Italy, Germany and now in the US. Our children will marry or impregnate Caucasian in Europe and in America. We will mix with intricate fabric of the Western society, but we will still remember to jihad when time comes. Who are we? We are the sleeper cells. We will raise our children to be loyal to Islam and Muhammad only. Everything else is secondary. At the time of the real fight, we will hold our own children as our armour. When American or Israeli troops shoot at us, the world will be watching. Imagine the news in the world, death of Muslim babies by infidels. We know CNN, ABC, CBS are broadcasting live. Al Jazeera will pour gasoline on the fire. The news will spread like wildfire. Americans kill 6 babies, 10 babies. Jews kill 2 women. Keep your nukes in your curio cabinets. Keep your aircraft carrier or high-tech weaponry in the showcase. You can't use them against us because of your own higher moral standard. We will take advantage of this and use it against you. We won't hesitate to use our children as suicide bombers against you. Visualise the news flash all over the world. A Muslim mother is sobbing, crying. Her babies are killed by Jews and Americans. The whole world is watching live. Hundreds of millions of Muslims all around the world are boiling. They will march through Europe. We will use our women to produce more babies who will in turn be used as shields. Our babies are the gift from Allah for jihad. The West manufactures their tanks in the factory. We will manufacture our military force by natural means, by producing countless children. That is the way it is cheaper. You infidels cannot defeat us. We are 1.2 billion. We will double again. Do you have enough bullets to kill us? On the camera, we will always say Islam is the religion of peace. We will say jihad is actually inner jihad. Moderate Muslims will say there is no link between Islam and terrorism, and the West will believe it, because the West is so gullible. Moderate Muslims all over the world will incubate jihadists by their talk of defending Islam. Using the Western legal system, we will assert our Sharia laws slowly but surely. You will be impressed when you meet a moderate Muslim personally, as your next door neighbour, co-worker, student, teacher, engineer, professionals. You may even like us. You will find us well-mannered, polite, humble, that will make you say, wow, Muslims are good and peaceful people. But we will stab you in your back when you're sleeping, as we did on 9/11. There will be more 9/11s in Europe and in America. We will say we do not support terrorism, but America got what it deserved. Muslims, CAIR, ISNA, MPAC and other international Islamic organisations will unite. We will partner with leftist ACLU and Kofi Annan and the UN, and if we have to, then even with France. Fasten your seatbelt. The war of civilizations has just begun. We will recite Quran and say Allahu Akbar before beheading infidels, as we have been doing. We will videotape those and send to all infidels to watch. They will surrender. Islam means surrender. We will use your own values of kindness against you. You are destined to lose. Must be very depressing for you, isn't it? Allahu Akbar, as we say before beheading. 21st century Islamic warfare. Let's see the effectiveness of Islamic warfare. Muslims versus the West. The rule has changed. There is a new game in town. Bill Clinton ordered 50 Tomahawk cruise missiles costing $100 million each to destroy $50 mud houses that belong to Osama's family. What stupidity! What a poor return on investment. In return, Osama's attack on the US cost 19 martyrs and less than $500,000. Cost to the West over 3,000 dead. At least $1 trillion economical loss in 1 year. This includes the ripple effect. Osama's return on investment with respect to life equals 3,000/19 equals 158-fold. $1 trillion to 500,000 equals 2 million-fold. That is modern warfare. The West will lose. Allahu Akbar. Islam will rule the world. There's nothing you can do. Even if the per capita GDP of the world drops to half of its present level as a consequence of Islamic laws in place all over the world, still Islam will rule the world. From your point of view, if we bring the Dark Ages to the world, so be it. But still Islam wins. The West loses. Are you sure you want to play this game? Jihad, jihad, jihad. You are destined to lose. Allahu Akbar. Saudi Arabia's $100 billion investment over the last 3 decades on over 60,000 madrasas and schools all over the Islamic world is finally paying off. While the West was busy inventing medicine, increasing life expectancy, elevating human suffering, decoding the human genome to find a cure for cancers, heart disease and more, launching space shuttles, inventing the internet, working on new laws and theories for human rights, developing better economical models for a more prosperous world, while ACLU was gaining control over common sense, while American ingenuity was benefiting the rest of the world, We Muslims were busy producing over 200 million out of 1.4 billion walking, talking, none-thinking, West-hating, pre-programmed, suicidal, parasitic, terrorist robots. You can't win. The genie is out of the bottle. We will use America's kindness, fairness, compassion, freedom of speech and non-discriminatory policy against them. We will stab them in the back. What are you going to do? You are doomed. Not nice, but at last some truth from Islam. The one I'm about to read now is from I'm No Kafir in France, and he picked this up. Excuse the English, it isn't good, and I've left it as the original. The following are excerpts from an article by an Algerian blogger living in England. For the indigenous British, the train of history has reached its terminus. It's over. Should pick up his bags and prepare to go. Where, I do not care. When the various parts of the UK began to rot, those indigenous born left the areas affected, since then transformed into violent slums. Gradually the day comes when providing grants for community cohesion does not solve the problem, and as you have no money left, you no longer have this option. Gradually the British race is replaced, and the Muslims and their supporters, amongst others, are happy. You British look blissfully at your nation from your safe havens and are happy to have never voted for the British National Party. In the ocean, when an animal is injured, raptors come in from everywhere. Everyone wants his little piece, and your country is the dying animal today. They are descending on you from everywhere, these raptors, through your taxes, your finance, housing, food and care of those who are trying to replace you. When there will not be enough workers to pay for parasites, it will be chaos and violence. For this immigration, the UK particularly selected populations incapable of gaining or producing even their own daily bread. Whilst immigrants like me work hard, ask for nothing and are ashamed of those of us who do not, instead preferring to be idle, lazy parasites, this is something you seem to like and encourage. You call it something like multiculturalism. You are fools, as my French countrymen and indigenous peoples all over Europe and the world, because they will take you over and eliminate you. The British only want one thing, to disappear. They are too ashamed to exist. Only a minority of you stupid British want to change the situation, whilst you're still a majority. Because it's time to respond. Do it before it's too late. Now this isn't a nationalist message or even my message, it's from the horse's mouth, and it is facts. Guys, just the facts. In my opinion, our problems with general immigration pale in comparison to what the true enemy in our midst is. They can be your neighbours, your shopkeepers, your carekeepers, your landlords, your teachers, your nurses, your MPs and your councillors, your doctors and many more. If they are of the Muslim persuasion, they are almost certainly the wolves in sheep's clothing, and they could also be part of your family. I certainly don't deny there are probably some very good, kind-hearted, clever and devoted people who belong to Islam. But you must remember the Islamic agenda and the long-term plan. It may include you or may not, but beware, buyer, or buyer, beware. And finally, another out of the horse's mouth. A guy was sitting quietly reading his paper when his wife walked up behind him and whacked him on the head with a magazine. "What was that for?" he asked. "That was for the piece of paper in your trouser pocket with the name Laura Lou written on it," she replied. 2 weeks ago when I went to the races, Laura Lou was the name of one of the horses I bet on," he explained. "Oh darling, I'm sorry," she said. "I should have known there was a good explanation." 3 days later he was watching TV when she walked up and hit him on the head again, this time with a frying pan which knocked him out cold. When he came to, he asks, "What was that for?" "Your horse phoned." You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night. On Friday. Firstly, thank you to Pete Malloy for his comments, and I would highlight the fact that World at 8 is a Radio Britain podcast. It goes out on YouTube as well as through the BNP site. It is not a British National Party podcast, although it features some BNP members, of whom I am one. Thought for the day is my personal view, and I've always taken full responsibility for it, as it can often not follow the party line. Thank you also for the majority of very well thought out comments on the Pete's and World at 8 site. I also thank Hate Not Hope for actually listening to my thought all the way through and spreading the word. I couldn't have done better myself. The point missed was the fact that we should think more of our own serving soldiers and ex-soldiers than a vast array of so-called relatives of a few thousand mercenaries who already live thousands of miles away in their own country. However, I would like to say to a Mr. or Ms. Agazeo who commented on Pete's article that obviously he or she stands just about as much of a chance of producing a well-informed and succinct comment as I do in obtaining a very lucrative position on the Guardian newspaper, although I feel I do deserve one. UK News. 8 years for impotent, it's my first time I'm sorry rapist. A man who failed in his attempt to rape a woman in a Peterborough street told her, "It's my first time, I'm sorry," a court heard as he was jailed for 8 years. Khalid Abdullah, 35, tried to sexually attack the woman on April the 13th at 5:20 am, dragging her into an alleyway and pushing her up against a wall on Star Road. Abdullah also threatened the woman with a knife, but due to his impotence he was unable to carry out the rape. He then told the woman to call the police herself before she managed to escape from his grip and get away. Rape Crisis, a confidential counselling service, supported the woman in coming forward to the police. CCTV footage was combed through and a Sudan
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 28th of October 2013. 8 years for impotent, it's my first time I'm sorry, Sudanese rapist. 7 years for illegal immigrant rapist who wasn't deported 7 years ago. Father started killer blaze after daughter planned to wed lover he didn't approve of. Bulgaria building a wall and turning mosques into bars. Refugees at Poland's gates. Dutch scientists are seeking to create mutant flu viruses. High prelates trade luxury cars for economy vehicles. Syria, Islamic jihadists burn Bibles and Christian books outside Christian churches. In China, cockroaches are now being farmed, powdered and sold to pharmaceutical companies as medicine. Thought for the day, straight from the horse's mouth. And finally, another horse's mouth. Now I do have a response to the comments on the Gurkha Thought for the Day.